The Calgary Police Service, in partnership with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, is currently on scene of a suspected synthetic drug production lab in the community of Whitehorn. At approximately 2:15 p.m. on Wednesday, August 22nd, 2012, members of District 5, along with the tactical team, executed a drug warrant on a home in the 200 block of Whiteview Bay Northeast. Once inside, officers determined there was a suspected production lab located inside, as well as in a detached garage. One man who was inside the home at the time was arrested and has since been charged. Shawn Micheal Casey, 32, of Calgary, is charged with several drug-related offenses. Due to the large quantity of unknown chemicals located on the property, the Calgary Fire Department's hazardous material response team was brought to secure the scene and to assist with any possible decontamination issues. Following the clearing of the home, the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team Alert, Green Team South, and the RCMP K Division Clandestine Lab Enforcement Response Team were contacted to provide investigative support as well as to respond to the location. The CLEAR team, which arrived from Edmonton last night, is currently undertaking the assessment, sampling, and dismantling of the suspected drug laboratory at the residence. The scale of the illegal synthetic drug production taking place at this location has yet to be determined. It is also unknown exactly what substances are present, and further testing will be required. Due to the volatile nature of the chemicals typically used in drug labs, neighbors located on both sides and behind the house were asked last night to voluntarily vacate the area. All complied and spent the evening elsewhere, and it is hoped that those folks will be able to return to their homes later tonight. So I'll answer what questions I can. I don't believe, in my memory anyway, the last time we had a synthetic drug lab located in Calgary was probably 10 or more years ago. So we know they exist. There's a lot of synthetic drugs being manufactured. We all, you hear all the time where they're coming from, Lower Mainland, overseas, being transported back and forth nationally, internationally. But to find a lab like this in the Calgary area is pretty significant.
Does the home where this lab was have a history with?
No, and in fact, the individual that we had in our custody, we have no record and no history at all with the service. So we had no knowledge of this home prior to this.
Is there the potential of charges against other suspects?
Sure, and again, this is really early. So the intent, so we had your typical drug warrant. We walk into the home. We were expecting to find drugs. We were expecting to find drug paraphernalia. When we walked in, we find this what we believe, again, things have to be determined yet, but what we believe is this drug production laboratory. So there were some legal things that had to be done. Different warrant had to be issued. The house was secured. We went in, so we weren't expecting to find what we found. We don't know what all these chemicals are. In fact, what we found was there was some yellow powder substance. There are various chemicals, so we don't know what those chemicals are. And there's some kind of plant or organic material. And again, so we have to determine what the powder was. We have to determine what these chemicals are. Some are in marked, some are in unmarked containers, and then whatever this organic material was. And once we determine that, the investigation continues. If we find out if there's any other people involved, certainly there could be more charges. But at this point, based on what we have so far, this individual has been charged. Now we'll work with the CLEAR team and our drug unit, try to determine what the contents of the house were, and then we'll see what happens as far as the investigation. But I suspect there'll be more follow-ups, probably additional information coming to the public and the media in the future here.
Was he the only person living there?
We don't know that. He was the only one in there at the time, taken into custody. So I guess we'll find that out again through the investigations.
How did you know about it? Like, why did you get the warrant?
We had a complaint from the public, and we investigated that complaint based on the information that we were able to obtain. We were able to get a warrant, and of course the warrant, as I mentioned, specific, we believe, were drugs and drug paraphernalia. So, with that warrant, we were able to enter the residence, but then when we found the magnitude, we had to come back out again and get a different warrant, and then now working the scene on that second warrant as well. So it was originally a complaint from the public that we investigated.
So were you surprised at what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there, but I think it's safe to say that the folks that were there and entered the home, given that a drug lab like this is not a commonplace in Calgary, I think they were surprised at what they found.
Do you have any idea what it looked like inside? You know, are they boiling things up on the stove, or are there heaters? Is it high tech, or?
Well, I do know that lots of chemicals, more than one area. Like there was an area in the home, and then there's out in the garage. At this point, I don't have details as to what specifically. I guess when you hear a synthetic drug lab, you can envision what it probably looks like, but to be honest, I couldn't tell you exactly what the setup was like. But we do know chemicals, and they use powder, something, and it's all being tested right now.
How much, do you have an idea of quantity, were these big packages or in pails?
I don't, but I think from a public safety, officer safety, first responder safety standpoint, significant enough quantities that we felt it important to not only call in the fire department, but also evacuate the homes on either side and across the alley. But I couldn't tell you how significant those quantities were, at least at this time anyway.
And when you say synthetic drugs, what type, can you give an idea what type of drugs they're?
I can't yet. I guess until we find out what the chemicals are, what they were being used to produce. Clearly, you know, some kind of synthetic drug or something that might be mixed with other street drugs. But at this point, once we find out what the chemicals are, once that white or the yellow powder is, and maybe what that organic mash is, we'll have a better idea of what they were producing out of that home.
Can you give us a list of what counts as synthetic drugs, like meth and?
Off the top of my head, no. But I mean, you're looking at, you know, your typical chemically produced drugs. So your ecstasy and meth and any kind of hallucinogenic type drug that is built from mixing a whole bunch of different chemicals, and either, you know, depending on the type of drug that's being made, it can be ingested, it can be smoked, it can be crushed into pills or powder or whatever. So I would think that it's probably along those lines, but specifically, no, I couldn't tell you what's happening in this particular home.
How concerning is it having all those chemicals in this house? Like, I mean, obviously you guys are evacuating the neighbors.
Yeah, well, very, very concerning. I mean, you've got concern for the folks that are actually in the home. When you're dealing with very, very flammable chemicals, you don't know what kind of controls are in place, even for their safety. But then on top of that, you have the safety of the community, and that's why we immediately asked the folks on either side and across to leave. But then, of course, there's a real issue for our officers and fire department and any other first responders that might go to the home on either a related or unrelated type call. You know, when you walk into an unknown like that, could be potentially deadly. So very, very concerning when you come across any kind of uncontrolled environment like this, especially with these types of contents inside.
Do you have any indication how long it might have been set up?
Well, again, it's early, and then based on just the kind of the preliminary information that we have so far, we believe probably 6 months. I think we can safely say 6 months. Maybe as the investigation goes a little further, we might find out that it's been in existence or running for longer than that. But at this point, I think it's safe to say about 6 months.
And when you think about it being running for 6 months, is there concern that there could be other labs like this in Calgary that are just kept well under cover?
Yeah, I think we'd be naive to think when you see so much synthetic drugs out there, and you know, a lot of it. You know, recently we went through the whole ecstasy PMMA, and we know that these drug labs are in operation. We know that, you know, they can be in a basement, in a room, as we, you know, see here in a garage. It's not difficult to set them up. So I think for us to think that, you know, Calgary doesn't have any, city of 1.1 million, I think would be naive. So we believe that there probably were drug labs, maybe in Canada, Alberta, even in Calgary. It's just we haven't come across one in a number of years. So that's what makes this, probably it validates what we believed, but this makes it significant that we've actually now found one.
How difficult is it to find something like this with chemicals, Darlene? With
Well, and again, I don't have the details, the investigative details that they've been working on since the public tip. So obviously there's enough of a trail of information and investigative information that got them to the point where they identified a location and were able to get enough grounds that a judge would offer up, or sorry, sign up a warrant so they could enter. So I think that anytime you're dealing with drugs, of course, people go to great lengths to keep it out of the public eye and certainly off the radar of the police service. But you know, we rely heavily at that time on the neighbors and suspicious activity and the public calling us and tips, and there's all sorts of ways people can get information to us. And again, this started with information from an individual, so who knows what they provided and then what additional information we obtained to get the grounds for the warrant. So are they obvious? Sometimes, if you know what you're looking for, but oftentimes not. And as we've found in the past, some of the biggest grow ops and drug operations in the city are in the most affluent neighborhoods and the nicest homes. So it's difficult sometimes to detect, and that's why we rely on the public to help us out.
So you guys aren't sure of the chemicals that they're going to end up making? Like, you didn't find any symmetry in the finished product outside?
Well, we found yellow powder, so we don't know what that is yet. And the chemicals, once I guess we determine, so we'll have experts analyze those chemicals and say this is what it is. And then, you know, between the folks in the RCMP and their experts and our drug folks, we'll be able to get a better idea of, when you mix all that together, this is typically what you get. Hopefully we'll get some good solid answers and leads off of the yellow product. But again, it's what they're going to do now is this afternoon, the Clear folks and their experts will do some field testing, but it'll be pretty rough field testing just to get a basic idea. But probably most or if not all of that content of that home will be taken away to a proper laboratory. So it might be a few days at least before we actually know what we're dealing with. But certainly we knew we were dealing with flammable substance. But as far as what that is and what it was going to be used for, we'll have to wait and see.
So nothing packaged or ready for sale?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know the yellow powder, what form it was in, but.
In terms of the state of the home, like, is there indication, given the toxicity of everything, that it might be condemned? Like, was it that bad? Like, or was it even worse?
I don't have that information. So I think once there was very limited access to the home, and it's only because of the concern of the officer and first responder safety. So I don't have information as to what condition it was inside, but I think they're taking some pretty significant precautions, personal precautions, respiratory and otherwise, before they actually go in and start dismantling that. So we'll probably have a better idea in maybe a day or so when we give you an update as to exactly what, and again, you know, this is a pretty significant event for the city, so we'll want to share what information we can, because the information we can share will maybe help us in the future identify similar homes. So.
Just to clarify, it's believed that the young person was living in the home?
Well, as far as whether they live there or not, we don't know. There was one person present in the home when the search warrant was executed. So whether they lived there, were there at the time, or if other people are there or living there, we don't know that yet. But the one person in the home was taken into custody and subsequently charged.
And did you say there's more charges pending
Possibly.
possibly?
Maybe not against that individual, but as we move along and we find out what we're dealing with, and maybe get more information as to where this stuff was going, who it was being made for, other people involved. There could be other people identified and other charges laid.
Is there buying and selling going on there, or just strictly production?
I don't know that. But although when the charges were trafficking, possession, and production, so there was some form of movement going on. Now what form that was, we don't know yet. So.